Okay, here is the second tank for the Mek's workshop for improvement. This is acquired on a Facebook sales group, and yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, this needs sorting, doesn't it? So it's obviously just a big gun on tracks, said gun being a cardboard tube. I think I will replace that. And then a random cockpit stuck on top. That's apparently a new driver's cap. On the sides, the paint is very caked on, and it's basically obscured all of the detail. All of it. I've not got any of the doors and the back ramp that goes on here, so it's just looking at the inside of the model, but there's obviously no internal detail in there, so it just looks wrong. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say. Let's get this stripped, and then I can start a rebuild and turn it into something good. I cut out a load of the paint stripping here. This actually needed multiple baths in the methylated spirits to get through 6 layers of paint, and even then I still couldn't get it all off. Next I had the wonderful task of clearing off all the glue. For reassembly I started on the gun barrel first. I used a pipe from the Mantic Games Industrial Scenery Pack, and then used the larger wheels from the Chimera kit to form the next cylinder. To cover up the gaps between the wheels, I wrapped them with some 0.1mm thick plasticard, which is almost as flexible as a piece of paper. For the final part of the gun barrel, I used some leftover PVC pipe from some housework. I tried to use a pipe cutter here, but it didn't really work, and I had to resort to using my knife. I realised at this point that I cut it too long. It didn't really look right, so I went back and I trimmed it down. I stuck it on with some super glue. For the main body of the gun, I used 1mm thick plasticard. I cut out front, middle and back sections, as you can see here, but unfortunately they weren't quite the same size. So I stuck them together with a tiny drop of glue and then trimmed them down and filed them so that they were all the same size. Once they'd been trimmed, they were easy to take apart again. After assembly, there were some gaps in the corners, and I filled these in with Vallejo plastic putty. The shock absorbers were made out of plastic tubing. When it came to the main body of the tank, I eventually decided that actually it would just be easier if I assembled my own hull instead, so I did this again out of 1mm plastic card. Now, after assembly, I realised that unfortunately there wasn't quite enough room for the gun, so I set about widening the body with some strips of plastic card. I just needed to widen it by about 4 to 5mm. To reassemble the tracks, I had to dive into my bits box. Now, I'm really lucky that I have plenty of spare Imperial Guard tank tracks for these builds. The Chimera is actually notorious for these tracks not meeting up properly, so I left gaps at the top where I was intending to add track guards. The idea of track guards morphed into full-on walkways, so I added some supports using plastic H-beam pieces and additional strips of plastic card. When it came to the cab, I felt that it would be raised too high if I just stuck it down as is, so I set about lowering the height of it by trimming off excess plastic underneath. This took a lot of cutting, sawing and filing. It was not fun. I used some textured diamond plate plastic card on the rear platform. Now for the gun shells. I made the tips from some spare pieces from the Mek gun kit and then attached them to some plastic tubing. Finally, the ends are sealed with more plasticard. Plastic strips were used to make the cab look a little more integrated with the build rather than just being an odd thing bolted on top. Unfortunately, at this point, I didn't like the proportions of the tank and felt that it now looked too wide. It doesn't sound like much, but the extra 4mm width didn't sit right with me, so I started on the painful task of undoing the work that I'd already done, widening the tank. I think when it comes to builds like this, you have to be prepared and go back and redo bits. If you're not happy with how it's shaping up, you're not happy. Getting the proportions right is extremely important for the overall feel of the model. If you don't get those right, go back and redo them, or you just won't be happy. I decided to add a loading crane like the Forge World Medusa model. This was made out of the Battle Wagon's grabber claw arm, a random wheel from a tank kit, and plenty of plastic tubing and plastic strips for the actual claw mechanism. The crew were assembled from the bits box. I really like the Ork range for conversions because there's just so many different bits, especially arms. You can expand this even further with simple hand swaps. Ultimately, again, if you don't think something's working out, don't be afraid to go back and redo it. Finally, we move on to the fine detailing part, and this is lots of armour plates being stuck fairly randomly all over the model. Not sure what's quite going on with the camera this time, that it's knocking about like that, but I do apologise if you get any motion sickness. And last but not least, rivets. So let's have a look back at where we started with this monstrosity. And here we have the final build. And finally with paint. This was another really fun build. My aim with these is to take the original idea and try and execute it a little better. I do feel I kind of strayed a little bit from the original vision by making it an open topped gun platform, but I do like the end result. I especially like how the crane ended up. I hope you enjoyed the build, and I'm going to say the usual like, share and subscribe. I've got more content like this coming, so make sure you keep an eye out for it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.